I still remember the first time Michael's mother looked me up and down with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 5 years ago, I was a 32-year-old graphic designer with big dreams and an even bigger heart. Now I'm watching my mother-in-law, Evelyn, fold her designer clothes into the dresser of our guest bedroom, the same woman who once said I would never be enough for her precious son. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, doesn't it? Michael and I met at a charity auction for the local children's hospital. I was there designing promotional materials, and he was a sponsor representing his family's real estate development company. Our eyes locked across the room in that cliché way you read about in romance novels, but never actually believe happens in real life. He approached me with 2 glasses of champagne and a smile that made my heart skip a beat. "You look like you could use this more than I could," he said, handing me one of the glasses. There was something genuine about him that stood out in a room full of wealthy donors more interested in being seen than in the actual cause. We spent the entire evening talking in a quiet corner, ignoring the auction entirely. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Michael was everything I'd ever wanted: kind, intelligent, successful but humble, and he looked at me like I hung the moon. The first time he mentioned his mother, though, something changed in his expression. A slight tightening around his eyes, a subtle shift in his posture. "She's particular," he said with a small laugh that sounded more like an apology. "But she'll love you once she gets to know you." I should have paid more attention to the warning signs, but when you're falling in love, you tend to see what you want to see. 3 months into our relationship, Michael suggested we have dinner with his mother. "It's time," he said, squeezing my hand reassuringly. "She's important to me, and so are you." The restaurant he chose was one of those places where the menu doesn't list prices, and the waitstaff hover like elegant shadows. Evelyn arrived precisely on time, a slender woman in her early 60s with perfectly coiffed silver hair and the kind of posture that spoke of old money and older expectations. "So," she said after the briefest of introductions, her eyes coolly assessing every detail about me, "Michael tells me you work in graphics? Is that like advertising?" There was something in her tone that made my relatively successful career as a senior designer at a respected firm sound like I sold pencil sketches at the county fair. Throughout dinner, she peppered me with questions about my family, my education, my prospects, each one delivered with a smile but landing like tiny daggers. Michael squeezed my knee under the table when I mentioned my father was a retired mechanic. I felt like I was failing an exam I hadn't studied for. Still, I stayed hopeful. Families were complicated, and first impressions weren't everything. Michael was worth it. He beamed at me across the table, seemingly oblivious to his mother's subtle interrogation, and I convinced myself that with time, she would see what her son saw in me. I just needed to be patient, to prove myself worthy of her approval. If only I'd known that her smile masked judgment that would haunt our marriage for years to come. And I certainly never imagined that one day, the woman who deemed me unworthy of her son would be living under my roof, dependent on my generosity. But that's getting ahead of our story, isn't it? The night we told Evelyn about our engagement ranks among the most uncomfortable evenings of my life. Michael had proposed during a weekend trip to the coast, getting down on one knee at sunset on a secluded beach. It was perfect, intimate, and exactly what I would have wanted. "My mother will want to celebrate," he said on the drive home, already reaching for his phone. "Let's have dinner at her place this weekend." I nodded, fingering the vintage emerald ring on my finger. A family heirloom from his grandmother. When we arrived at Evelyn's sprawling Tudor-style home in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, she greeted us with champagne already chilled. "I had a feeling," she said with a knowing smile at Michael that somehow excluded me entirely. Her house was immaculate, filled with antiques and family photos. I noticed immediately that most featured Michael alone or with his mother. The dining room table was set with china that probably cost more than my car, crystal glasses that rang like bells when touched, and silver so polished I could see my nervous reflection. "So, Sarah," Evelyn said, delicately cutting into her roast duck, "will you be keeping your job after the wedding? Most of the wives in our family focus on charity work and supporting their husbands' careers." The emphasis on our family made it clear which category I fell into. "I love my work," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've actually just been promoted to lead designer." Michael quickly added, "Sarah's incredibly talented. Her firm handles major national accounts. Evelyn's smile tightened. How modern! Though I do wonder how you'll manage when children come along. The Mitchell men have always had stay-at-home mothers. It's partly why they've been so successful. Each passive-aggressive comment built on the last. My community college education compared to the Mitchells' Ivy League tradition. My modest upbringing in contrast to their generations of wealth. My small apartment versus the family properties scattered across the country. Michael remained frustratingly silent through most of it, occasionally offering a weak, "Mom, come on," but never directly confronting her increasingly obvious disapproval. As we drove home, I finally asked, "Does it bother you that your mother clearly thinks I'm not good enough for you?" Michael sighed, keeping his eyes on the road. "She's just protective. She's been the only woman in my life for a long time. Give her time to adjust." But as wedding planning began, it became clear that time wasn't the issue. Evelyn had opinions on everything, from the venue, "Wouldn't the country club be more appropriate than that rustic barn you mentioned?" to the guest list. "These are business associates your father and I cultivated for decades, Michael. They simply must be invited." To my dress. "Something more traditional would suit your figure better, dear." The first real confrontation came over the ceremony itself. I had always dreamed of writing our own vows, something personal and meaningful. "Absolutely not," Evelyn declared during a planning lunch she had insisted on. "The Mitchell family has used the same traditional ceremony for generations. It would be disrespectful to change it now." When I looked to Michael, expecting support, he stared at his plate. "Maybe we could do both," he suggested weakly. Later that night, he came to me with a glass of wine and a contrite expression. "I know my mother can be difficult," he said, sitting beside me on our couch. "But she's been alone since Dad died, and I'm all she has. Could you try to be patient with her? For me?" I wanted to scream that his mother was systematically undermining every choice I made, treating me like an interloper rather than his chosen partner. Instead, I swallowed my frustration and nodded. I loved him. I could be patient. I could compromise. During a bridal luncheon, Evelyn insisted on hosting for her friends. None of mine were invited. I overheard her talking to her sister in the kitchen. "Of course I'm taking charge," she was saying. "Can you imagine what this wedding would look like if I left it to her? No sense of tradition or propriety. Michael will thank me later." I stood frozen in the hallway, clutching my water glass. "Everything is a test with Evelyn," Michael's cousin Emma whispered to me later, squeezing my arm sympathetically. "She does this to everyone, even her own family." As I watched Evelyn hold court among her friends, all nodding in agreement with her pronouncements about proper wedding etiquette, a question I couldn't shake began forming in my mind. Was I really good enough for this family? Would I ever be? I pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the man I loved. This wasn't about Evelyn. It was about Michael and me. But as our wedding day approached, the question kept returning, stealing quiet moments of what should have been pure joy. And somewhere deep inside, I was beginning to fear the answer. Our wedding day dawned with perfect weather and imperfect family dynamics. I was in the bridal suite with my sisters and best friend when there was a sharp knock at the door. Evelyn swept in wearing a pale blue ensemble that had probably cost more than our entire flower budget. "The florist has made a terrible mistake with the altar arrangements," she announced without so much as a good morning. "I've instructed them to redo everything, and the string quartet is playing the wrong processional. I've corrected them as well." My maid of honor shot me a worried look as Evelyn approached, scrutinizing my appearance. "Your hair should be up, not down," she said, reaching toward my carefully styled curls. "And that necklace doesn't suit the neckline of the gown." My sister Jane stepped between us. "She looks beautiful exactly as she is," she said firmly. "And we need to finish getting ready in private." Evelyn's lips thinned, but she retreated with one final comment. "I've just always pictured Michael's bride differently." Despite the morning's tensions, walking down the aisle toward Michael made everything else fade away. His eyes filled with tears when he saw me, and the love on his face was unmistakable. We had compromised on the ceremony, using traditional vows but adding personal statements. When I glanced at the front row during our exchange, Evelyn sat rigidly, her expression unreadable but decidedly not joyful. At the reception, I was floating on happiness until I went to the ladies' room and overheard Evelyn's distinctive voice from around the corner. "It's a lovely wedding," she was saying, "though not what I would have chosen." But then, neither was she. There was a pause. Between us, I give it 5 years at most. She's not built for our world, and Michael has always been easily distracted by novelty. I stood frozen, my hand on the bathroom door. Strong words about your new daughter-in-law, another woman replied. Evelyn laughed softly. Daughter-in-law is a generous term for a temporary situation, don't you think? I retreated to a stall, hands shaking. When I returned to the reception, Michael immediately noticed something was wrong. What happened? He asked, pulling me aside. I couldn't bring myself to repeat his mother's words on our wedding day. Just overwhelmed, I lied. Everything's perfect. His relieved smile broke my heart a little. Our 2-week honeymoon in Greece was a blissful escape. Without Evelyn's influence, Michael was completely present, completely mine. We talked about our future, our dreams of starting a family, my career aspirations, his plans to expand the family business. Not once did he mention his mother, and I allowed myself to hope that married life would establish new boundaries. That hope died the day we returned. We walked into our new home to find Evelyn had let herself in and was rearranging our kitchen. Welcome home, she called, as if this were perfectly normal. I've just been setting things up properly. The wedding gifts have all been organized, and I've replaced those dreadful curtains in the living room with something more suitable. Michael looked embarrassed, but not surprised. Mom, we would have handled this, he said mildly. We just got back. Evelyn waved away his concern. Nonsense, you have enough to do. Sarah certainly isn't experienced in setting up a proper home. And just like that, the honeymoon bubble burst. Our first Thanksgiving as a married couple became a battleground. I had offered to host, wanting to establish our own traditions. Evelyn arrived 3 hours early to help, which meant criticizing everything from my menu to my table settings. Mitchell family Thanksgivings always include oyster stuffing, she informed me, opening my refrigerator without asking. And where are the crystal water goblets I gave you? These everyday glasses won't do for a holiday. By the time other guests arrived, I was nearly in tears, and the turkey was overcooked because Evelyn had adjusted the oven temperature without telling me. Michael spent the evening working overtime on charm, smoothing ruffled feathers, laughing off tensions, and drinking more than usual. Later, he retreated to his home office with work calls that somehow couldn't wait until morning. This pattern became our new normal. Michael worked increasingly long hours, leaving me to navigate his mother's frequent, unannounced visits and constant suggestions for improving our home, my appearance, my cooking, my everything. When I tried to discuss it with him, he deflected. She means well, or that's just how she is, or, most frustratingly, can't you try harder, for me? Every attempt I made to build a relationship with Evelyn was met with polite resistance. I invited her to lunch, suggested shopping trips, even offered to help with her favorite charity. She accepted with cool courtesy but used each occasion to highlight how I didn't quite measure up. 6 months into our marriage, I finally snapped, after Evelyn rearranged our bedroom furniture while we were at work. Your mother needs boundaries, I told Michael that night. She can't keep treating our home as her personal domain. Michael's face hardened in a way I'd never seen before. She's lonely and trying to help. You're being oversensitive. Oversensitive? Michael, she changed our bedroom. Our bedroom. That's not helping, that's controlling. The argument escalated until he grabbed his keys. I'm going out. You clearly need to calm down. He didn't come home until after midnight. When he slid into bed beside me, the smell of whiskey on his breath, I lay awake wondering what I'd gotten myself into. The critical voice in my head that had been growing louder since our engagement now screamed at full volume. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not enough. 2 years into our marriage, Evelyn invited the extended Mitchell family to her lake house for the 4th of July. I had been dreading it for weeks, but Michael insisted we needed to attend. Family is everything to us, he said, packing his golf clubs into the car. Besides, my cousins have been asking about you. The drive to the lake was beautiful, winding through pine forests that opened to reveal glimpses of sparkling blue water. I tried to focus on the scenery rather than the knot in my stomach. Evelyn's lake house was actually a sprawling estate, with a boat dock, tennis court, and enough bedrooms to accommodate 20 people comfortably. As we pulled up, I smoothed down my sundress and applied fresh lipstick, armor for the coming days. You look beautiful, Michael assured me, squeezing my hand. Everyone's going to love you. If only that had been true. The first day went smoothly enough on the surface. I met aunts, uncles, and cousins who were polite, if somewhat reserved. Michael relaxed visibly among his family, a carefree version of himself I rarely saw at home. I spent most of the afternoon helping in the kitchen, trying to earn approval, through utility. That evening, as everyone gathered on the massive deck for drinks before dinner, Michael's cousin Emma pulled me aside. Emma had always been kind to me, one of the few Mitchells who seemed to see past my outsider status. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure we weren't overheard. "Aunt Evelyn has been talking about you, to everyone." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Emma looked uncomfortable. "She's been telling people not to get too attached to you because you're temporary." Her words, not mine. "She told my mom you're probably after Michael's money, and that he'll come to his senses eventually." The shock must have shown on my face because Emma quickly added, "Most of us don't believe her. We can see how much Michael loves you." But the damage was done. Throughout dinner, I couldn't help noticing the speculative glances, the whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. Michael remained oblivious, deep in conversation with his uncles about business opportunities. After the meal, several cousins gathered in the game room for drinks and cards. I joined them, desperate for any distraction. 3 glasses of wine into the evening, Michael's cousin James looked at me with sudden candor. "You know, Sarah, you're nothing like what Aunt Evelyn described. She made you sound like some gold-digging harpy with no education and trash family." The room went silent. James's wife elbowed him hard. "What?" he said. "It's a compliment. She's actually great." Something inside me snapped. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every undermining action of the past 2 years crystallized into a perfect, clarifying rage. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me," I said, walking with forced calm, back to the main house. I found Evelyn in the kitchen, directing the cleanup with her usual imperious efficiency. Michael stood nearby, nursing a scotch and laughing with his uncle. Without planning to, I walked straight up to them. "I need to speak with both of you," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Now." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "We're in the middle of something, Sarah. Perhaps later would be better." "No, now is perfect," I insisted. "I've just had a fascinating conversation with James. He told me how you've been describing me to the family. Gold-digging harpy was mentioned. Temporary was another highlight." Michael's face drained of color. "Sarah, I'm sure it was a misunderstanding." Evelyn's laugh cut him off. It was a cold sound, entirely without humor. "Oh, for heaven's sake, everyone knows the truth. You married a girl with no family connections, no social standing, from a background that couldn't be more different from ours. You were rebelling, making a point. It's what young men do." She turned to me, her smile venomous. "But marriage isn't a phase, dear. It's a foundation for the future. And you simply aren't worthy of carrying the Mitchell name or legacy." The dining room fell silent. Even the staff had frozen in place. Michael stared at his mother, then at me, his mouth opening and closing without sound. I waited for him to defend me, to put Evelyn in her place once and for all. Instead, he said weakly, "Mom, that's not fair. Sarah is my wife. That's it. Not, how dare you speak to the woman I love this way, or apologize immediately." Just a mild objection that did nothing to counter the vicious assessment his mother had just delivered in front of everyone. I looked from one to the other, suddenly seeing with perfect clarity what I had been refusing to acknowledge for years. This would never change. She would never accept me, and he would never truly stand up for me. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the house. I kept walking until I reached the lake, then followed the shoreline to a small, secluded beach. The night was warm, the sky brilliant with stars, but I shivered as I sank onto the sand. I thought about my own family. My father, who had worked 60-hour weeks at his auto repair shop to put my sisters and me through college. My mother, who cleaned houses to make extra money when times were tight. The small but joyful holidays around our scratched dining table. We didn't have wealth or social connections, but we had love and respect for each other. When had I started believing that wasn't enough? When had I accepted the premise that I needed to prove myself worthy of joining the almighty Mitchell family? I heard footsteps on the sand and knew without looking that it was Michael. He sat beside me, not touching. "She didn't mean it the way it sounded," he began. I laughed, a broken sound. Yes, she did. She meant exactly what she said. And the worst part is, you know it too. That's not fair, he protested. This is just how family dynamics work in our world. Mom is from a different generation. She has certain expectations. And I'll never meet them, I finished for him. No matter what I do, how hard I try, how much I accomplish, I will never be good enough because I wasn't born into the right family. Michael ran his hands through his hair in frustration. What do you want me to do? Cut off my mother, my entire family? This isn't just about us, Sarah. There's history here, traditions, business relationships that go back generations. In that moment, I realized we were having two entirely different conversations. He was talking about navigating a difficult situation while maintaining the status quo. I was questioning whether our marriage could survive at all. We drove home the next morning in silence. I stared out the window at the passing landscape, replaying Evelyn's words and Michael's weak defense over and over. As the familiar skyline of our city came into view, I knew we had reached a crossroads. Something fundamental had to change, or we wouldn't make it another year. The question was, could either of us make that change happen? The week after the lake house incident, I made 2 appointments, one with a therapist for myself and one with a couples counselor for Michael and me. When I told Michael about the couples counseling, he balked. We don't need a stranger telling us how to fix our marriage, he insisted. We just need time to get past what happened. I looked at him steadily. If we don't get help, there won't be a marriage to fix. Something in my voice must have conveyed my seriousness because he reluctantly agreed. Dr. Melissa Chen was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with a direct gaze and a calm demeanor. In our first session, she asked us both to describe what we wanted from our marriage. Michael talked about partnership, family, continuing traditions, and building something lasting together. When my turn came, I surprised myself with my answer. I want to be seen, I said simply. Not as an accessory or a mistake or a temporary situation, but as an equal partner worthy of respect. Over the following weeks, we unpacked the patterns that had defined our relationship. In a breakthrough session, Michael finally admitted what I had long suspected. I've spent my entire life trying to please my mother, he confessed. After my dad died, it was just the two of us. She poured everything into me, and in return I felt responsible for her happiness. Dr. Chen nodded. And how does Sarah fit into this dynamic? Michael looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in months. She threatens it, he said quietly. She asks me to choose, to put her first in a way that feels like betrayal to my mother. And yet that's exactly what marriage vows request, Dr. Chen pointed out, to forsake all others. Meanwhile, in my individual therapy, I was confronting my own issues with self-worth. Dr. Taylor, my personal therapist, challenged me directly. Why do you accept being treated as less than? She asked during one particularly difficult session. Where did you learn that love requires constant proving of yourself? It was a painful question that led to deeper exploration of my own family dynamics. Though loving, my parents had struggled financially all their lives, and I had internalized a sense that we were somehow less valuable than families with wealth and status. I had been trying to earn my place in Michael's world instead of recognizing my inherent worth. 4 months into therapy, I made a decision. I need to set a boundary with Evelyn, I told Michael one evening. I can't continue to have regular contact with her unless her behavior changes significantly. He looked panicked. What does that mean exactly? It means I won't be attending family functions where she's present unless she treats me with basic respect. It means she doesn't get unlimited access to our home. It means when she speaks to me dismissively, I will call it out directly instead of staying silent. Michael paced our living room. She'll see this as a declaration of war. I see it as self-preservation, I countered. And you need to decide which matters more to you, your mother's approval or our marriage. It was an ultimatum I never thought I'd deliver, but I had reached my limit. True to Michael's prediction, Evelyn didn't take the new boundaries well. When he told her about our decision, she launched a campaign to turn family members against me. There were tearful phone calls to relatives about how I was isolating her son and destroying family unity. Holiday invitations came addressed only to Michael. Mutual friends reported uncomfortable encounters where Evelyn described me as controlling and unstable. Through it all, Michael struggled. Some days he stood firm, defending our boundaries, and supporting my position. Other days he wavered, suggesting compromises that would essentially return us to the status quo. On his worst days, he withdrew entirely, working late or losing himself in mindless television, unable to bear the conflict between the two women in his life. During this difficult period, I focused on rebuilding myself outside my identity as Michael's wife. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, joined a book club, and took a weekend art workshop. I also poured myself into my career, which had suffered during the worst of our marital troubles. When an opportunity for advancement came up at my firm, my first instinct was to decline. Taking on more responsibility would mean less time available to fix my struggling marriage. But therapy had taught me to question these reflexive thoughts. Why was it always my career that needed to be sacrificed? Why was I the one who had to constrain my ambitions? After much reflection, I applied for the position of Associate Creative Director. The interview process was rigorous, but focusing on my professional strengths was invigorating. When I received the offer, I felt a surge of pride and accomplishment I hadn't experienced in years. Michael's reaction was mixed. "I'm proud of you," he said, but then immediately added, "How will this affect our plans to start a family?" Before therapy, I might have backpedaled, assuring him that family was still my priority, that I could balance everything. Instead, I was honest. "I don't know yet, but I do know I need this. I need to remember who I am outside of our marriage, and all its complications." My new role brought challenges, but also a renewed sense of confidence. As I successfully led campaigns and mentored junior designers, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been diminished by years of subtle undermining. I started speaking up more at home as well, no longer constantly filtering my words through the lens of, will this please Michael, or upset the balance? When Evelyn heard about my promotion through family channels, her response was predictably dismissive. At a rare family gathering we both attended, she made a point of saying loudly, "I've always found career women so fascinating. Sacrificing family for ambition seems like such a modern choice." In the past, a comment like that would have devastated me. This time, I looked her directly in the eye and replied, "What I find fascinating is the assumption that women can't excel at both career and family when men are never asked to choose." She had no response, and several female relatives nearby actually applauded quietly. As I walked away, I realized something profound had shifted. For the first time, her words couldn't touch me. My worth was no longer dependent on her approval, or even on Michael's constant validation. I was standing on my own foundation, and it felt solid in a way I had never experienced before. By our third anniversary, both Michael and I had changed significantly. My promotion had led to further career growth, and I was now being considered for a creative director position that would put me among the top leadership at my firm. The increased salary and professional respect had transformed how I saw myself and how others perceived me. Michael, too, had evolved. Our continued couples therapy had helped him recognize the unhealthy patterns in his relationship with his mother. While he hadn't cut ties with Evelyn, he had established clearer boundaries. When she called with demands disguised as requests, he no longer automatically accommodated her. When she criticized me, he now consistently defended me. Progress was slow and imperfect, but the direction was clear. "I never realized how much of my life was shaped by trying to please her," he admitted one night after a particularly difficult phone call with his mother. "Even my career choice was about continuing the family legacy, not what I actually wanted." This revelation led to Michael exploring his own passions beyond the family business. He discovered a genuine interest in sustainable development and began steering the company's investments toward environmentally responsible projects. For the first time in our marriage, we were both growing individually, while also reconnecting as a couple. We started having real conversations again, not just about day-to-day logistics, but about our dreams, fears, and aspirations. We took weekend trips without telling anyone where we were going. We made love with a renewed passion born of genuine intimacy rather than obligation. The shift in our relationship dynamic was reflected in a major decision we made that spring: buying a new home. Our current house had been chosen primarily for its proximity to the Mitchell family compound and its adherence to what Evelyn considered appropriate for someone of Michael's station. The new property we fell in love with was across town in an up-and-coming neighborhood, a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings, industrial details, and a rooftop garden. It was nothing like the traditional Mitchell homes, and that was precisely what attracted us. The day we signed the purchase agreement. Michael took my hand across the table. "This is ours," he said firmly. "Not my mother's, not my family's. Ours." We spent weeks planning renovations, choosing furniture, and envisioning our future in the space. For the first time, every decision was truly collaborative, without the shadow of Evelyn's preferences hanging over us. When we finally told his family about the move, reactions were predictably mixed. Younger relatives thought the loft was cool and unique. Older family members were politely confused by our choice to leave the prestigious neighborhood where Mitchells had lived for generations. Evelyn's response was direct and disapproving. "It's so far from family," she complained when Michael called with the news. "And in such a questionable area. I can't imagine what you're thinking." "We're thinking it's perfect for us," Michael replied, a new firmness in his voice. "We're not asking for opinions, Mom. We're simply informing you of our decision." After he hung up, he looked at me with a wry smile. That would have been a 2-hour conversation with tears and guilt trips a year ago. Progress, right? Moving day was chaotic, but joyful. Friends helped us pack and unpack, turning work into celebration with music, takeout, and plenty of laughter. As I arranged books on our new built-in shelves that evening, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and misplaced furniture, I felt a profound sense of peace. For the first time since our wedding, I was creating a home that was truly mine, truly ours, without Evelyn's influence shaping every choice. Our new beginning seemed charmed. Michael's sustainable development initiative was gaining traction in the industry. My promotion to creative director came through, bringing not just a substantial raise but also the opportunity to shape the creative direction of the entire firm. We settled into a rhythm in our new home, establishing routines and traditions that belonged solely to us. I even reached a place where I could think about Evelyn without that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. Her disapproval had lost its power over me. She was simply my husband's difficult mother, not the arbiter of my worth. Then came the news that would change everything again. After years of assuming we had fertility issues, I discovered I was pregnant. The positive test left me sitting on the bathroom floor in shock. Michael and I had tried for a baby early in our marriage, stopping when the stress of the situation with Evelyn began taking its toll. We had discussed returning to the idea of starting a family someday, but had put concrete plans on hold while focusing on rebuilding our relationship. When I told Michael that night, his eyes filled with tears. He lifted me off the ground in a gentle bear hug, then set me down as if I might break. "Are you sure?" he kept asking, his voice filled with wonder. "Really sure?" We agreed to keep the news private until after the first trimester. But as the weeks passed and morning sickness set in, it became impossible to hide from family and colleagues. Michael's sister was the first to notice, eyeing my ginger tea and crackers at a family dinner with knowing recognition. She was thrilled for us and promised to keep our secret. Evelyn, however, found out from a different source. Apparently, Michael's cousin Emma had seen me coming out of an obstetrician's office and jumped to the correct conclusion. True to form, Evelyn didn't wait for us to share our news. She arrived at our new home unannounced one Saturday morning, bearing gift bags and a barely concealed agenda. "I had to come immediately when I heard," she announced, sweeping past me into the loft. "A Mitchell baby! This changes everything!" My heart sank as she began pulling baby clothes and heirloom blankets from her bags. "These have been in the family for generations," she explained, handling a yellowed christening gown. "All Mitchell babies wear this for their baptism at the family church." Before I could respond, she was moving through our home with critical eyes. "This place won't do it all for a child," she declared. "So many hazards and no proper nursery space. You'll have to move back to a family neighborhood before the baby comes." When Michael emerged from his home office, confused by the commotion, Evelyn turned to him with bright eyes. "Darling, I've been thinking. Sarah will need to quit that demanding job now, of course. The Mitchell tradition is clear on mothers being fully present for their children. I can help her transition to a proper charity position with reasonable hours after the baby is a year old." The presumption was breathtaking. She spoke as if my career, our home, and all our choices were suddenly subject to Mitchell family approval again, simply because I was carrying a Mitchell heir. Michael looked from his mother to me, clearly seeing the danger signs in my expression. To my immense relief, he stepped directly to my side. "Mom," he said calmly but firmly, We appreciate your excitement, but Sarah and I will be making our own decisions about our family, just as we've been making our own decisions about our lives. Evelyn waved away his words. Don't be silly, this is different. A child needs family traditions, proper upbringing, connections. I found my voice at last. A child needs happy, fulfilled parents who make choices based on love, not obligation. My hand rested protectively on my still flat stomach. I will be continuing my career. We will be staying in our home. And while we welcome your love for your grandchild, the decisions remain ours to make. Evelyn's expression hardened. I see Sarah's influence has completely overwhelmed your sense of family responsibility, Michael. He shook his head slowly. No, Mom. Sarah's influence has helped me find my own voice and values, not just echo whatever you think is best. It was the clearest, strongest stance he had ever taken. As Evelyn gathered her things to leave, muttering about ingratitude and modern nonsense, I felt no anger, only a calm certainty that we were on the right path. Our child would grow up in a home where both parents were respected, where traditions were chosen rather than imposed, and where love was never conditional on conformity. That night, lying in bed with Michael's hand resting gently on my stomach, I realized how far we had come. From the uncertain, insecure woman desperate for Evelyn's approval, I had become someone who could stand firmly in her own worth. The journey had been painful, but the destination was worth every step. The day our daughter Lily came into the world was the most transformative experience of my life. 36 hours of labor culminated in that miraculous moment when the doctor placed her tiny, squalling body on my chest. She's perfect, Michael whispered, tears streaming down his face as he counted her fingers and toes. Perfect she was, with a shock of dark hair like her father's and eyes that would eventually settle into my hazel color. The overwhelming love I felt looking at her little face reset my understanding of what mattered in life. All the career achievements, family dramas, and personal insecurities seemed to recede in importance compared to this new, fierce commitment to protecting and nurturing this small human. The first few weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights, breastfeeding challenges, and the steep learning curve of new parenthood. Michael took a full month off work, proving himself an enthusiastically involved father from the start. He changed diapers without complaint, took night shifts with bottles of pumped milk so I could sleep, and somehow managed to make me feel beautiful even when I was leaking milk through my shirt and couldn't remember when I'd last showered. We kept visitors to a minimum those first weeks, wanting to bond as a family without outside interference. My parents came for a brief, helpful visit, bringing home-cooked meals and offering practical support without overstepping. They held Lily, with reverent joy, clearly smitten but respectful of our new family boundaries. When we finally invited Evelyn to meet her granddaughter, her reaction surprised us both. She arrived with an enormous teddy bear and tears in her eyes. The moment she held Lily, something shifted in her expression, a softening I had never seen before. She has the Mitchell chin, she said softly, tracing Lily's profile with a gentle finger. And your eyes, Sarah. She's absolutely beautiful. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought perhaps the birth of her grandchild might be the turning point in our relationship. That hope lasted approximately 2 weeks. What began as occasional helpful suggestions quickly escalated to outright criticism of our parenting choices. Evelyn was horrified that we were using cloth diapers instead of the brand she recommended. She questioned our decision to follow a sleep training method different from what she had used with Michael. She brought over baby clothes we hadn't asked for, insisting Lily would be more comfortable in her selections than the organic cotton we preferred. Most concerning was her growing habit of showing up unannounced, using the key we had given her for emergencies to let herself in while I was napping with the baby. I would wake to find her rearranging Lily's nursery, or, once, actually changing the sleeping schedule posted on our refrigerator to align with what she thought was best. This isn't working, I told Michael after finding Evelyn giving Lily a bottle of formula when I had explicitly said I wanted to maintain exclusive breastfeeding. Your mother is undermining every parenting decision we make. Michael, exhausted from balancing work and new fatherhood, initially tried to minimize the situation. She's just excited about being a grandmother. She wants to help. This isn't help, I insisted. Help is respectful of parents' wishes. This is control. The situation came to a head when Lily was 4 months old. I returned from a brief outing to find Evelyn had brought over her old pediatrician, a man in his 70s who had retired years ago, to examine Lily because she thought the baby's cry sounded wrong. I walked in to find this stranger holding my daughter while Evelyn explained symptoms I hadn't observed. "What is happening here?" I demanded, immediately taking Lily from the man's arms. Evelyn smiled brightly. "Dr. Winters was just confirming what I suspected. Lily has colic, not that fussy baby nonsense your pediatrician diagnosed. He's prescribed a treatment regimen we used for Michael that worked wonders." I held Lily close, my heart pounding with anger and fear. "You brought a doctor here without our permission to examine our child and prescribe medication?" "Not medication," Evelyn corrected. "Natural remedies. And why would I need permission to help my granddaughter? You clearly aren't experienced enough to recognize when she's ill." That was the moment Michael finally drew a firm line. He had come home early, standing in the doorway long enough to hear his mother's dismissive words. "Mom," he said in a voice I had never heard him use before, "you need to leave. Now." Evelyn turned in surprise. "Michael, don't be ridiculous. I'm helping." "No," he said, stepping fully into the room. "You're overstepping in the most serious way possible. You have no right to bring a doctor to our home without our knowledge or consent. You have no right to second-guess our parenting decisions. And you absolutely have no right to speak to Sarah that way in her own home." Dr. Winters, looking increasingly uncomfortable, gathered his things without a word and slipped out. Evelyn, however, stood her ground. "I raised you successfully for 30 years. I think that gives me some authority on childcare matters." "It gives you experience," Michael corrected. "Not authority over our child. There's a difference." "You wouldn't be saying this if Sarah wasn't poisoning you against me?" Evelyn snapped, her composure cracking. "She's turned you against your own mother, and now she's going to keep me from my only grandchild." Michael took a deep breath. "Mom, I love you, but I need you to leave now. We'll talk when everyone is calmer." When Evelyn continued to protest, he took her gently but firmly by the arm and walked her to the door. "We'll call you in a few days," he said, and closed the door on her shocked face. That night, after Lily was asleep, we had a long overdue conversation about Evelyn's role in our family going forward. "I should have set firmer boundaries from the start," Michael admitted. "I just kept hoping she would respect our parenting naturally if given time." "I think we need a break from her visits," I suggested. "At least until she can acknowledge what she did was wrong." Michael nodded slowly. "I'll talk to her once things have cooled down. Make it clear that her relationship with Lily depends on her respect for us as parents." True to his word, Michael called his mother a few days later and explained our position. Evelyn did not take it well. There were tears, accusations, and finally, silence. For 3 full months, she made no attempt to contact us. Through family channels, we heard she was telling everyone we were keeping her grandchild from her out of spite. Several relatives called to urge reconciliation, most taking Evelyn's side without hearing our perspective. We held firm, focusing on our little family and the joy of watching Lily develop. She rolled over, started solid foods, and developed a belly laugh that could light up the darkest day. Without the constant stress of managing Evelyn's interference, I found motherhood far more enjoyable. I returned to work part-time when Lily was 6 months old, grateful for a progressive company that allowed me to balance career and family on my own terms. By the time Lily's first birthday approached, I felt ready to attempt a reconciliation with Evelyn. "She's missing so much of Lily's life," I told Michael one evening. "Despite everything, I don't want our daughter growing up without knowing her grandmother." Michael looked surprised, but pleased. "You'd be willing to try again?" I nodded, with clear boundaries and consequences if they're crossed. "But yes, I'm willing to try." We sent Evelyn an invitation to Lily's first birthday party, a small gathering of close friends and family in our home. The card included a handwritten note acknowledging the difficult months of separation and expressing our hope for a fresh start. The ball was in her court. When the day came, I watched the door with mixed emotions. Part of me hoped she wouldn't come, that we could continue our peaceful existence without her complications. Another part understood that family relationships, however difficult, were worth the effort to maintain when possible. 10 minutes after the party started, the doorbell rang. Michael answered it to find Evelyn standing there, uncharacteristically subdued, holding a small gift bag. "May I come in?" she asked, sounding uncertain for perhaps the first time in her life. And with that tentative question, we began the careful process of rebuilding a very different kind of relationship than the one we had before. 5 years flew by in the beautiful blur that is early parenthood. Lily grew from a toddling 1-year-old into a vibrant, creative kindergartner with her father's confidence and my stubborn streak. Our relationship with Evelyn settled into a careful, distant civility. She attended Lily's birthday parties and occasional Sunday dinners, keeping her more controlling impulses in check after one early incident led to another month-long timeout from visits. While she never became the warm, supportive mother-in-law of my dreams, she learned to operate within the boundaries we established. Michael and I found a rhythm in our marriage that worked well for us. His company continued to thrive under his leadership, with the Sustainable Development Initiative earning industry awards and attracting like-minded investors. My career at the design firm had reached new heights, with a client list that included major national brands and a team of talented designers under my direction. Lily attended a progressive elementary school that nurtured her natural curiosity and creative instincts. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good, stable, and largely peaceful. Then the economic indicators began to shift. It started with small news items, declining housing sales, increased foreclosure rates in certain markets, tightening credit conditions. Michael noticed the changes before most people, coming home with a furrow in his brow that deepened each day. "The real estate market is headed for trouble," he told me one night after Lily was asleep. "We're positioned well enough with our diversification into sustainable projects, but many in the industry aren't." His concern extended to his family members, many of whom were heavily invested in traditional real estate development. "Mom especially," he added. "Almost everything she has is tied up in luxury properties and speculative developments." I nodded, remembering that Evelyn had partnered with another Mitchell family member in a high-end condominium project the previous year. "Is she aware of the risk?" Michael shook his head. "She dismisses my concerns as unnecessary worry. Says she survived the last downturn just fine and will weather this one too." As the months passed, the economic situation worsened. What began as a sector-specific slowdown spread to other industries. Companies began laying off workers. Credit froze. The stock market plummeted. Michael worked increasingly long hours, navigating his company through the turbulent waters while also trying to advise family members who were suddenly more willing to listen. The first sign that Evelyn specifically was in trouble came when she canceled hosting the annual Mitchell family Thanksgiving, a tradition she had maintained for decades. "She said she's traveling," Michael reported after a brief phone call with his mother. But something felt off. She was vague about where she was going, and Thanksgiving is sacred to her. A week later, Michael's cousin James called with concerning news. "Aunt Evelyn is selling her art collection," he said. "Those pieces have been in the family for generations. She wouldn't part with them unless something was seriously wrong." When we saw Evelyn at Christmas, the changes were subtle, but noticeable. Her usual designer outfit was replaced by something I recognized from years before. The extravagant gifts she typically brought for Lily were scaled back to a single, thoughtful present. She declined wine with dinner, citing cost rather than preference. Still, she maintained her pride, deflecting questions about her situation, and changing the subject whenever business or finances came up. The truth emerged fully at an extended family gathering in early spring. Mitchell family meetings were traditionally held quarterly to discuss family investments and philanthropic activities. This particular meeting, however, took a dramatic turn when Evelyn's business partner Douglas stood up to make an announcement. "I regret to inform the family that I am filing for bankruptcy," he stated flatly. "The Vista Heights project has failed completely, and I have no choice but to liquidate all assets to satisfy creditors." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Vista Heights was the luxury condominium project Evelyn had invested in heavily. Michael immediately looked for his mother, finding her sitting rigidly in a corner, her face ashen. "What about the investors?" someone called out. "What about Aunt Evelyn?" Douglas couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "I've been trying to keep the project afloat for months using creative financing. The investment funds are gone." The implication hung in the air. The evening Evelyn moved in remains etched in my memory. Michael brought her home in his car, her belongings reduced to 3 suitcases and a few boxes of personal items. Everything else had been sold, repossessed, or left behind in the house she had lived in for over 30 years. She stood in our entryway looking smaller somehow, her perfect posture slightly stooped, her immaculate appearance showing subtle signs of strain, chipped nail polish, a loose thread on her sleeve, shoes slightly worn at the heels. Thank you for having me, she said formally, as if she were a weekend guest rather than someone who had lost everything. It's temporary, of course, just until I sort things out. I nodded, showing her to the guest room while Michael brought in her luggage. We've cleared space in the closet and dresser, I explained, opening drawers to demonstrate. The bathroom is through that door. Towels are on the shelf. She ran her hand over the simple duvet cover, so different from the luxury linens she had always favored. It's very modern, she said, clearly searching for something polite to say about a style she had previously criticized as cold and impersonal. Dinner will be ready in about 30 minutes, I added. Nothing fancy, just pasta tonight. That first dinner was excruciating. Lily, excited to have Grandma staying with us, chattered happily about school and friends, oblivious to the tension between the adults. Michael maintained a stream of carefully neutral conversation about the weather, current events, anything but Evelyn's situation. I focused on serving food and keeping Lily from spilling her milk. Evelyn picked at her meal, answering questions with minimal responses, her eyes occasionally darting around our dining area, as if still trying to process her new reality. After Lily was in bed, we addressed the practical aspects of the arrangement. We both work full-time, I explained, and Lily has school and activities. Here's a spare key and the alarm code, but we'd appreciate a text if you're planning to be out when we get home, just so we know. Evelyn nodded stiffly. Of course, I wouldn't want to worry you. Michael outlined our basic household routines. Breakfast times, who handled drop-off and pick-up for Lily, when we typically had dinner. We share household responsibilities, he added. I usually cook on weekends, Sarah on weekdays. We take turns with laundry and cleaning. The implication that Evelyn might contribute to these tasks hung in the air, unspoken but understood. I'm sure I can help with something, she said after a moment. I've never been one to sit idle. We can figure that out as we go, I said, keeping my tone neutral. The most important thing is that you have space to regroup and plan your next steps. That night, after Evelyn had retreated to her room, Michael and I lay in bed discussing the situation. She seems so different, he whispered. Subdued. Almost meek. Losing everything will do that to a person, I replied. Especially someone whose identity was so tied to status and possessions. I never thought I'd see her like this, he admitted. Dependent. Uncertain. I squeezed his hand in the darkness. It's a major adjustment for everyone. We just need to take it one day at a time. The first week established patterns that would continue for months. Evelyn kept mostly to her room when we were home, emerging for meals and occasionally offering to help with dishes or laundry. Her interactions with me were unfailingly polite but distant, as if we were acquaintances rather than family. With Michael, she was slightly warmer but still restrained, careful not to make demands or criticize. With Lily, however, she began to blossom, reading stories, helping with simple homework, listening with genuine interest to the elaborate imaginative games only a 5-year-old could create. The first crack in Evelyn's carefully maintained facade came about 2 weeks after she moved in. I came home early from work one day to find her sitting at our dining table, surrounded by papers, a calculator in hand. She quickly gathered everything. When she saw me, but not before I glimpsed past due notices and collection letters. I didn't expect you so soon, she said, flustered. I can move this to my room. It's fine, I assured her. This is your home too for now. You don't need to hide in your room. She gave me a searching look. That's very generous of you considering our history. It was the first acknowledgement of the elephant in the room. We're family, I said simply. Whatever happened before, we're in this situation together now. She nodded, then hesitantly asked, You work in finance, don't you? Marketing and design, I corrected. But I handle our household budget. Do you want some help sorting through that? She hesitated, pride visibly warring with practical need. Finally, she nodded. I would appreciate another perspective. For the next hour, we went through her financial situation together. It was even worse than I had imagined. Not only had she lost her major assets, but she also had significant credit card debt from trying to maintain her lifestyle as things deteriorated. At 68, her job prospects were limited, and while she would receive Social Security, it wouldn't be enough to live independently in our expensive city. What am I going to do? She whispered, the question seemingly directed more at herself than at me. For the first time, I saw fear in Evelyn Mitchell's eyes, the genuine terror of someone facing an uncertain future without resources or clear options. "We'll figure something out," I said, echoing Michael's words from weeks earlier. "You have time to think and plan while you're here with us." That evening marked a subtle shift in our relationship. The next morning, Evelyn was up before everyone, having made coffee and set the table for breakfast. "I thought I could take Lily to school today," she offered. "Give you both a few extra minutes to get ready." Over the following weeks, she gradually integrated more into our household routines. She prepared simple dinners on days when both Michael and I worked late. She took over the laundry without being asked. She began accompanying Lily to the park after school, giving our regular sitter an unexpected break. What surprised me most, however, was watching Evelyn observe our family dynamics with increasing interest. She would watch Michael help Lily with a craft project, patience evident in every movement. She would listen to our dinner conversations, where everyone, including Lily, was encouraged to share opinions and ideas. She would notice how Michael and I consulted each other on decisions, large and small, with genuine respect for each other's perspective. One evening, I found her in the living room looking through our family photo albums. "You found the memory books," I commented, sitting beside her on the couch. She nodded, turning pages slowly. "You three look so happy together," she said softly. "In every picture. Such joy. Such connection." I glanced at the photo she was studying, Michael and me with a toddler Lily at the beach, all of us laughing, as waves lapped at our feet. "We've worked hard for that happiness," I replied. "It didn't just happen." Evelyn closed the album carefully. "I never understood," she said, her voice barely audible. "Why Michael chose you. Why he would step away from everything I thought was important. I didn't see..." She trailed off, looking around our home with new eyes. "You've given him something I never could. Acceptance. Freedom to be himself." Tears welled in her eyes, surprising us both. I was so afraid of losing him that I nearly guaranteed it with my behavior. I sat silent, recognizing the cost of this confession to a woman who had spent decades believing herself always right, always superior. "I was jealous," she continued after a moment, "of your youth, your relationship with my son, your confidence in yourself despite having none of the advantages I valued, and later of your beautiful family, your successful career, the home you created together." She looked at me directly. "I convinced myself you weren't worthy of Michael. The truth was, I feared I wasn't necessary to him anymore once he had you." The raw honesty of her words left me momentarily speechless. For years, I had imagined confrontations where I would tell Evelyn exactly how her behavior had hurt me, damaged my confidence, nearly destroyed my marriage. I had rehearsed speeches and arguments in my head during sleepless nights. But faced with her vulnerability, her broken pride, those prepared statements seemed unnecessary, even cruel. "Michael has always loved you," I said instead. "That never changed, even during our worst conflicts. You raised an incredible man, and that's part of why I fell in love with him." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't make it easy for either of you." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of years of tension between us shifting into something different, something not quite forgiveness yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. In the months that followed, Evelyn's presence in our home evolved from an uncomfortable necessity to something unexpectedly valuable. She formed a deep bond with Lily, revealing a warmth and playfulness I had never seen in her before. She and Michael began having long conversations about family history, sharing stories and memories without the pressure of expectations. Most surprisingly, she and I developed a cautious friendship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I helped her navigate government assistance programs and explore part-time work options suitable for her age and skills. She offered insights on a challenging marketing campaign I was developing for a luxury brand, her knowledge of high-end consumer psychology proving remarkably useful. 6 months into her stay, on a rare evening when we were alone in the house, Evelyn finally said the words I had never expected to hear. "I am sorry, Sarah," she said, her voice steady but humble, "for how I treated you. For the judgment, the criticism, the attempts to come between you and Michael. I was wrong. Not just in my actions, but in my assessment of you." She took a deep breath. "You are more than worthy of my son. In many ways, he is fortunate to be worthy of you. The apology hung in the air between us, a bridge across a chasm I had once thought uncrossable. I had imagined this moment so many times, pictured myself delivering a coolly gracious acceptance speech that would subtly remind her of all her transgressions. Instead, I found myself nodding simply and saying, "Thank you. That means a lot to me." In that moment, I faced the choice I had been contemplating since Evelyn first moved in: revenge or grace. Looking at the diminished but dignified woman before me, I chose the latter. Not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Because Lily deserved to see that relationships can heal. Because Michael deserved to have his mother and his wife in harmony. Because sometimes the most powerful response to past hurt is not to hurt back, but to break the cycle entirely. 6 months turned into a year with Evelyn living in our guest room. What had begun as an emergency solution evolved into an arrangement that surprisingly worked for everyone. Far from being the controlling presence I had feared, Evelyn found her place in our family as a supportive figure rather than a central authority. Her transformation wasn't instantaneous or without setbacks, but it was genuine and ongoing. As we helped her rebuild some financial stability, she found purpose in ways none of us had anticipated. Through my professional connections, Evelyn secured a part-time position as a consultant for a local real estate agency. Her decades of experience and knowledge of the high-end market proved valuable even in an advisory role. The modest income combined with her Social Security allowed her to contribute to household expenses, restoring some sense of dignity and independence. More significantly, Evelyn discovered a talent for garden design, turning our once-neglected rooftop space into a thriving urban oasis. What began as a hobby became a small side business when neighbors and friends began asking for her help with their own outdoor spaces. "I never would have explored this if I hadn't lost everything," she admitted one evening as we sat among her flourishing plants. "I was so fixed on maintaining status and tradition that I never considered what might actually bring me joy." Michael found his relationship with his mother transforming as well. The dynamics that had defined their interaction for decades, her expectations, his desire to please, gradually shifted toward something healthier. They disagreed openly but respectfully about politics, business decisions, and family matters, neither feeling threatened by the other's different perspective. "I keep waiting for the guilt trip when I don't take her advice," he confessed to me. "But it never comes. It's like I'm finally having a relationship with my actual mother, not the construct I built in my head." The most beautiful development was watching Evelyn with Lily. Free from the pressure of upholding Mitchell family traditions or securing a dynasty, she could simply enjoy being a grandmother. She helped with school projects, learned to play video games despite claiming they would rot the brain, and became Lily's confidant for secrets deemed too minor for parental attention, but perfect for a sympathetic grandmother. As the months passed, we began discussing more permanent arrangements. Evelyn had saved enough for a security deposit on a small apartment, but every time the subject arose, the conversation drifted to other topics. Finally, one Sunday dinner, Lily asked the I question directly. "Grandma, are you going to move away?" The table fell silent. Evelyn looked from Lily to Michael to me, uncertainty clear in her expression. "I've been thinking about finding my own place nearby," she said carefully. "I've imposed on your family long enough." "But you are our family," Lily protested with the straightforward logic of a now 6-year-old. "And you belong with your family." Michael and I exchanged glances across the table, a silent communication born of years together. "Mom," he said, "we've been talking. If you'd be comfortable with it, we'd like you to stay. Not forever, necessarily. But for now, it's working for all of us." Evelyn's eyes widened. "But surely you want your privacy back, your space." I shook my head. "We've actually been looking at converting the storage space at the end of the hall into a proper mother-in-law suite, with its own entrance and kitchenette. You'd have more independence but still be part of our daily lives." "It was Sarah's idea," Michael added, reaching for my hand. The look of stunned gratitude on Evelyn's face was something I'll never forget. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. After everything, I confirmed. "We're still family. Different than before, better than before, but family nonetheless." That decision led us to where we are today. The renovation of Evelyn's suite was completed last month, giving her a comfortable, private space within our home while keeping her integrated in our family life. She continues her consulting work and garden design, finding fulfillment in activities she genuinely enjoys rather than those that confer status. Michael and I have found our marriage strengthened by the challenges we've faced together. The experience of setting boundaries, supporting each other through family conflict, and ultimately finding a path to reconciliation has deepened our connection in ways I never anticipated. Family therapy has been an important part of our journey. Initially suggested to help Lily adjust to the changing household dynamics, it became a valuable tool for all of us to process the past and establish healthier patterns for the future. In one particularly powerful session, Evelyn articulated the root of her controlling behavior. "I was raised to believe a mother's worth was measured by her son's success," she explained. "Not just financial success, but marrying the right kind of woman, living in the right neighborhood, having the right connections. When Michael chose differently, I experienced it as personal failure. Understanding didn't erase the hurt of those difficult years, but it helped me see Evelyn's behavior in context rather than as a personal attack. It allowed me to separate her actions from my own self-worth in a way I had struggled to do before. Perhaps the most profound lesson I've taken from this journey is about the nature of personal power. When I first met Evelyn, I perceived her as holding all the cards: social standing, financial security, the unconditional love of her son. I felt powerless by comparison, constantly striving to prove my worth in a game where she set the rules. The irony is that true power had nothing to do with those external factors. It came from knowing my own value, setting healthy boundaries, and choosing compassion when it would have been easier to seek revenge. Looking back at the frightened, insecure woman I was when I first encountered Evelyn's judgment, I hardly recognized myself. That woman believed she needed external validation to be worthy. She thought love meant constantly proving herself. She didn't understand that setting boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary for healthy relationships. The journey from that version of myself to who I am today wasn't straight or easy. It required confronting my own insecurities, standing firm in difficult moments, and ultimately recognizing that the approval I so desperately sought could only truly come from within. When Evelyn lost everything and found herself dependent on our generosity, I could have used that reversal to inflict the same pain she had caused me. The opportunity for petty revenge was certainly there. But what would that have accomplished beyond perpetuating a cycle of hurt? Instead, I chose to be the person I needed when I was vulnerable. Someone who offered respect, dignity, and the chance to rebuild. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in proving someone wrong, but in showing them a better way to be right. As Evelyn said recently watching Lily and Michael plant spring bulbs in the rooftop garden, "I spent decades believing family was about legacy and appearance. Now I understand it's about growth and acceptance. How much time I wasted on the wrong things." None of us knows what the future holds. Evelyn is in her 70s now, and we recognize that our current arrangement may eventually give way to new challenges as her health or needs change. But whatever comes, we'll face it together, not as adversaries, but as a family that has learned the hard way how to support each other through difficult times. If you had told me 6 years ago that my mother-in-law, the woman who once laughed and said I wasn't worthy of her son, would be living contentedly in our home, contributing positively to our family life, I would have thought you were describing a fantasy. Yet here we are, proof that people can change, relationships can heal, and sometimes life's most painful chapters can lead to unexpected blessings. Have you ever experienced a dramatic role reversal in a relationship? How did you handle having power over someone who once hurt you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this narrative resonated with you, please consider subscribing to my channel for more stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding strength in difficult situations. And if you know someone struggling with complicated family relationships, sharing this video might help them feel less alone. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to past hurt is not to hurt back, but to break the cycle entirely. Wishing you healing, wisdom, and the courage to choose compassion, even when it's the harder path.